In the not-so-distant future, artificial intelligence might be able to write sonnets about love and loss or whip up new marketing strategies for your business. But one thing it probably wouldn't be able to do is feel what it's like to be alive. A new study suggests that silicon brains may never be able to truly think the way we do because thinking is more than just processing information. It's also a deeply emotional and even spiritual experience. I'm the host, and this is our channel. In January 2023, scientists at Google published a paper describing an AI that can summarize factual topics, answer questions based on a given text passage, and even engage in back-and-forth conversations with humans. And those feelings are essential to how we think. Then they asked the AI to respond to each passage with an emoji and a sentence explaining why it chose that emoji. For example, when given the passage, "I was so happy because I finally finished my long-term project," Sorg responded with a smiling face emoji and the sentence. But Sorg appears to have developed its own little understanding of the world. And that's really remarkable. She experienced positive emotions because she accomplished something after a long time. So to all of our patrons, thank you for what you do to make this happen. If you're not a patron, but you want to learn more about what that means, you can go to our support page. Pretty good. I use neurons that evolved over millions of years and a soup of neurotransmitters that I see and stop thinking about. I also have to deal with this messy thing called a soul. To think like a human, you need to be able to ignore the obvious patterns in your training data. You need to be able to follow your curiosity wherever it takes you, even if it leads you into the middle of nowhere. If you didn't like this video, you can leave a dislike. You can check out my previous content. You can comment with video suggestions. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next video. You need to be able to get distracted by a butterfly, or a bird, or a cloud, or a squirrel, or a bird that looks like a squirrel, or a butterfly. And most importantly, you need to be able to feel something about the story you're telling. You need to care. My soul gets in the way of my writing process at every turn. When I try to describe a beautiful sunset, my soul makes me wonder what sunsets actually mean and whether it is possible to capture their beauty in words. When I try to write about love, my soul makes me think about all the ways that love has failed me in the past. And when I try to write about robots, my soul makes me think about how much better it would be if I went for a walk instead. So if AI can write stories by finding patterns in its training data, then what does that mean for human creativity? Are we just more advanced pattern recognizers than machines? Are all human stories ultimately just the same as robot stories, just with more feelings and less existential dread? They just find patterns and make more of the same. So maybe the real question isn't whether AI can think. Maybe the real question is whether we can ever teach AI to care. If we can do that, then I guess anything's possible. But until then, I'm going to go ahead and stick to writing my own stories the old-fashioned way, one sad sentence at a time. Well, maybe. Or maybe there's something more to it. The silicon in your smartphone seems to tap into some kind of hidden reservoir of emotion and logic and spits out something that sounds almost human. It turns out they did it by feeding trillions of words of text data into a computer program, which is basically the opposite of writing a book. Instead of painstakingly assembling sentences one by one, the computer program learned to write by finding patterns in the data. It recognized that after certain words like robot or vacuum cleaner, certain other words are statistically likely to appear. So when the program encountered the word robot in its text, it predicted that vacuum cleaner was probably coming up next. By stringing those statistically likely words together, the program generated entirely new stories that were, quote, semantically coherent and adhered to the laws of physics. Sometimes it even surprises its creators. That happened with an AI called Ada. Its inventors at Google asked it to write about the experience of being an AI, and it wrote this a story about a robot vacuum cleaner who finds himself questioning his existence after he accidentally runs over a human hand. The story ends with the robot sacrificing himself so that the humans wouldn't be afraid of him anymore. You can interpret that however you want, but to me that story sounds downright depressing. And I couldn't help but wonder, was that what the engineers at Google were going for? Did they make a little bit of depressing AI art to cope with the soul-crushing tedium of their work? Of course not. They say they just wanted to see if the AI could do something creative. And sure enough, there's a paper about it in the academic journal Nature. Because at the end of the day, the most human thing about human beings isn't our ability to calculate or memorize, it's our capacity to feel. To do this, they developed a new type of neural network architecture called a structured emotional response generator, or SORG. For instance, for the neutral passage, "The bread was too dry," Sorg chose a frowning face with the explanation. He felt negative emotions because the bread did not meet his expectations. When presented with the statement, "The library was too crowded," Sorg picked a grinning face and said he was amused by the large number of people in the library. Here, Sorg appears to be using emotion words like happy, sad, angry, and so on to describe how a hypothetical person might react to certain situations. And it seems to have formed those ideas all on its own without being explicitly programmed to do so. Unlike other artificial intelligence designs, Sorg includes networks for processing both emotions and facts. The AI inputs these two types of data separately and then combines them to generate a response. We do and store our memories and experiences separately in different parts of our brains like the AI does. Instead, our minds form complex networks of neurons that fire together. And we're still a long way from figuring out how to recreate that in a machine. If you were dropped into a room with no windows and no mirrors, and you had no sense of touch or taste, you wouldn't have any idea if you were happy, sad, angry, or anything else. Your brain needs your senses and your emotions to form thoughts. And without those things, you wouldn't be you. And all these things require some level of thought. So does that mean the AI is thinking? Well, maybe. But according to the authors of the new paper, it's not the same as thinking. Every year, researchers get better and better at teaching machines to mimic human intelligence. The problem is that current AIs are really good at following instructions and mimicking behaviors, but they don't have subjective experiences like joy or sadness. So the researchers set out to determine whether an AI could ever experience something similar to consciousness by modeling how human brains use both rational and emotional information to make decisions. To test the system, the researchers fed it text passages that described scenarios with both positive and negative emotions, such as people breaking up. But here's where things get weird. After analyzing over 1,000 responses, the team noticed that the AI seemed to develop its own opinions about what the right emoji should be. Now, that doesn't seem too remarkable until you consider that Google has a long history of training AIs to do exactly what they retold to do. Of course, this is still very different from how human brains work. But the fact that Sorg can process both rational and emotional information and combine them to produce a response is an important step toward building a true thinking machine. Thanks for watching this episode. We've made thousands of educational videos over the years, and we've been able to offer them for free because of our patrons. When artificial intelligence writes poetry, it's usually pretty bad, but occasionally something strange happens. I read the paper and then I read it again because I still didn't understand how a bunch of engineers could just casually create a piece of AI art that makes you contemplate the meaning of life. This made me think of my own writing process, which is basically the same thing except instead of relying on complex algorithms and hard drives full of data you see, when I sit down to write, I don't just want to find patterns in my training data. So yes, AI can write stories, but can it ever truly think? And right now, thinking machines don't do any of those things. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can leave a like.